idea of essence of clarity around your questions, and really role-play a few cases so you can really see how fast therapy can take place. You have to see it in living action to believe it. It will simply unleash. Yeah.
I do have a question. It's not exactly related, but are you going to be able to see a client in the clinic for people to observe, or did anything happen with that?
Nothing happened yet. The clinical group has to make a decision about whether they're likely to do that. And the students would have to show an interest in viewing me. We have to have at least a few students. And so I'd be glad to do it. Sure. I'll be doing some of it here too, so that you'll be glad to do it.
In our first week, you talked a little bit about depression. Would you talk about that a little more?
Of course. Depression. The fundamental question is, what is the pressed down in depression? And is there a therapy for depression? I would like to help you rise above that, in my judgment, a very simplistic notion that there is a therapy for specific disorders. Even though I had a book published related to that topic in my earlier years. I would also like to discuss with you why there is no specific child therapy versus adolescent therapy versus adult therapy. Therapy is always related to the specific pathology we understand a particular person to have. And then our challenge is, how are we to help them to integrate with those rejected feelings so that there is a true healing effect and undoing of whatever fixation may exist that keeps one pathological, unhealed, divisive within oneself, immature. And certainly, I got a chance today, and if I forget, please remind me. I would like to talk a little bit more about fixation and how you can be able to identify it, especially in terms such as, I just can't accept. You're going to find that fundamental to fixation is something that they feel they cannot accept. And it may sound like a situation they can't accept, which I'll role play for you today or next time. One of the fundamental principles I'd like to suggest to you is that our pathology is never related to a specific situation. It is related to our reaction, our interpretive reaction to that situation, our conceptual abstraction of that situation, and then our reaction to our own conceptual abstraction. So if we get abandoned as a child, that is not inherently pathological. If I react to it, if I conceptualize it as an element of rejection of me, as an element of absolute insecurity, as a reflection of my worthlessness, and then I react to that and I say, I can't accept having been abandoned. No. I can't accept some feeling in myself, for example, in this case, a confirmation of my worthlessness, of my insecurity, as a function of that abandonment and my reaction to it. There's no reaction to it. There is no pathology. The event by itself, life by itself, does not injure us. Our reaction to it, producing a feeling in ourselves that we think we cannot accept, is what produces fixation. And I hope I'll have a chance to discuss that with you in more detail should you be interested in that, because I think that is basic. Because you understand that if the reaction is what produces our pain and our fixation and our pathology, then unless we somehow alter that situation, we can't alter the pathology. We can't produce a healing effect. We can produce a psychotherapeutic effect because we recognize that what I can't accept is not in a given situation, but what I can't accept is some feeling produced in myself as a function of my reaction to any life circumstance. And I will teach you how quickly to read reactions through very stereotyped responses that clients will often give. So you're always listening for, I can't accept. We can't accept life no longer flows. We hold on to it. We freeze it static like an ocean that is constantly flowing. We make a chunk of ice out of it. A piece of fragmented, finite, separated feeling apart from the entire flow of the energy of our psyche. And it becomes isolated, frozen static, it floweth not, and it can't come into your consciousness and drain out. And there's pathology. I just can't accept. Every client is making that statement. I can't accept whatsoever. My parents doing this, my brother being better than I am. You see, my reaction to it is the pain. You're going to have to learn how to read those reactions quickly and not bother with how can I give the client a new situation. How can I be their new parent that now loves them even though the old parent didn't? How can I provide the security the former parent didn't? How can I provide the sense of worth, the sense of adequacy, the sense of whatever the original parents couldn't? That's not your job. Your job is to identify what they can't accept, which is their own self-created feelings of worthlessness, helplessness, inadequacy, unlovableness, whatsoever is their generalized conclusion, the conceptual abstraction of that event, and then their reaction to it, what I call the dramatization of it. You dramatize the event. Oh, if it weren't for my parents rejecting me, I'd be a strong, secure adult right now. And what I need is for somebody to give me what I never had. And many therapists fall prey to that notion that we have to supply the client with what they need, but the need is delusional. They need it because the deficiency in the first place is unreal. I was never worthless in the first place. I don't need worth. I was never inadequate in the first place. I was never unlovable. I was never any of those things. Having conceptualized myself that way and then reacted to that and then rejected it and then said I can't accept it, we are producing little by little. I hope I get a chance to explain that in more depth also when you remind me about fixation. I'll show you all the elements that contribute to the process of fixation. And the therapy is really the reverse process, the undoing of all of that. The conceptualizing of the feeling, the identification with the feeling, the value judging of the feeling is bad, the rejection of it, the repression or suppression of it, the cutting oneself off from it, in a state of subject-object duality, and so forth, and so on. So, the question is, what is depression? And understanding what is depression, we immediately see what the therapy for the depression must be. Understanding the child's pathology, the therapy is not a technique. You don't just do a technique with children. You must understand what is the child's pathology. What are the feelings the child cannot accept and has separated itself from. And then we can talk about the most expeditious means of helping the child who is not terribly verbal get to what is pathological. But the goal is the same, and that is a healing effect, a coming together of conscious awareness and that which has never been accepted in oneself as one's own self-created feelings about oneself. We have created ourselves through image and concept and are no longer spontaneously what we have been given to be and to actualize as our natural and real potentials. Can you wait for a while?
Yes.
I can talk slow.
what it is that makes you say child all of a sudden. Was your question specific to children, or is that just sort of a new facet?
No, that was my way of saying that there is no therapy for depression, just like there is no therapy for children, no therapy for adolescents. In many universities, they have special courses on psychotherapy with adolescents. That means that there's a particular technique you use for psychotherapy with children. There's a particular technique you use with all children, and there isn't. Some children you're building relationship, and as a function of needing to build relationship, to build a sense of capacity for the child to use relationship, when the child felt abandoned, rejected, and feels cold for all individuals, the relationship itself quite often becomes a therapy. Because the child is convinced that being close to others produces pain. It teaches the child that it produces something very glorious, and you can really learn to trust again, even though I, the child, having been traumatized, don't trust anymore. Because if you trust and you're vulnerable to pain, invariably pain comes. I conclude that therefore adults or people are not to be trusted, and I close myself away in terms of my capacity for relationship. So if relationship is the goal, and through my understanding of what is pathological, then the therapy has to expedite that as a goal. If the child's been traumatized, the child got caught in the fire and nearly got burned, or watched his own brother burn to death, there's a trauma there. What's the therapy going to be? I mean, the technique is not the therapy. People are not so mechanical that you're going to apply a static technique to a creative, flowing human being. The approach you use has to be based upon what you understand the pathology to be. Now, we're not going to recreate burning buildings, but quite often we're going to have to deal with the child's notion that unless I can control, I can't feel secure. Because if I don't have a sense of control, fires can happen, and I can die, baby brothers can die. Or the pathology is much more related to the fact that I should have saved my baby brother, and I didn't, and I saved myself, and I have to punish myself, and I can't let nice things happen to me. Because if I don't punish myself, God will probably punish me worse, or some such logic. You're not going to do a therapy technique with that. You're going to have to understand this child deliberately abusing itself as a means of control to make sure that God doesn't abuse him more, or to expiate the guilt feelings that he can't tolerate. So he fails in school now, and makes his parents punish him, and so forth and so on. You see, what you do for that child depends upon your understanding. No technique is going to be applicable to all individuals. In fact, no technique, in my judgment, is applicable to anybody. Because the technique is always the same, it's always rigid. It assumes the technique itself has a therapeutic element in it, instead of what has to happen in the client. But it takes the responsibility off the therapist to have to understand something. Then if the technique doesn't work, the therapist can claim it's the technique's fault, not my own. It takes no responsibility, which isn't very mature. And if we are anything at all, we're a little bit more mature psychologically than our clients. So we can talk about all those problems and all the forms of therapy. So it's a long way around to say, let's understand what depression is, so we understand what therapeutically has to happen, and then we can discuss what's the best way to make that happen. But there is no technique for therapy, there is no treatment for therapy, there is no therapy for depression, although in my own book on treatment-specific disorders, I have written a chapter on therapy for depressive individuals, which is not to assume that there is a specific technique. What I do is I present the understanding of what goes on in depression, so that you can then understand what needs to be done. So we're not dealing with depression, we're dealing with an individual, a human being, who happens to relate to feelings in such a way that they create depression. I might relate to feelings in a different way and create depression. And what underlies my depression may be different than yours. So the first thing we do is we help clients lift the label. We lift the static label of depression, because we don't know what depression is, it's just a word. Something is depressed or pressed down. Obviously something is pressed down in depression. But if you want to understand depression, or any other feeling, hostility, have the client remove the label. Because the label is static, and it serves as a cover over. The label serves as the cover over for the particular self-conceptualization that I'm not willing to look at. The static label, depression, serves as a cover so that my conscious awareness responds to the label and not to the ego-threatening message within the depression. That's its function. So don't get into how long have you been depressed, and when did you first start getting depressed, and when did it first occur, why did it occur? Because when you do that, you make the client move away from being with the depressed feeling itself, whatever it may be, into the surface of the mind, the conscious awareness, where he or she starts thinking about when did it occur. That's a conceptualization of the feeling. The answer to the feeling, the resolution of the feeling, lies within the feeling itself. This repressed subconscious message will tell you why I'm depressed.
So how would you begin an interview with a depressed client?
Okay, we can do it if you like. We can play it out, but let me tell you fundamentally what we're doing. Because a lot of clients will tell you that they are depressed when they are feeling many other things, and when we get into depression, I'll show you what other things we really are feeling, covered over by depression or covered over by anxiety. Depression and anxiety are not real emotions. They are pseudo-affects. They're designed to cover real feelings. So, the thing that I want to help you to understand in the treatment, and we'll get into the interview if you like in a little while, is no labeling of the feeling, not asking when or why, because you really don't know when it begins. How can you know when it begins? You can only know when the client permitted it to become conscious for the first time. But the event that triggered it may have been months before. When do you first remember being depressed? 2 weeks ago. Well, what happened 2 weeks ago? Like a detective, hone right in there, or prosecuting attorney. Where were you on the night of August the 22nd when you first started feeling depressed? But the fact that you first started feeling it then doesn't mean that it occurred then. You may have, for whatever reason, been open to it at that point. Your defenses against it may have diminished. Who knows what? You remember having felt depressed August the 22nd, but that doesn't mean that the events related to it occurred then. So it's a foolish question. It's an unnecessary question, because if the message inside the depression gets a chance to free itself, there's no depression. All the questions up here are irrelevant. You're going to try to work your way up here, down here. No. Ask me to be the depression. If that depression could speak, what would it say? Get me into the feeling, being the feeling, not the observer of the feeling outside the feeling. In a state of subject-object duality, where I tell myself I shouldn't be depressed. Then you get into all kinds of issues. It may take months exploring why shouldn't you be depressed. Strong people never get depressed. They should be able to be in charge of their lives, and all the shoulds that you hear, but that's not what is. Therapy is what is, not what should be. You are what we are calling depression, but we don't know what that is. If I tell you that in every case, that there is hostility directed back upon the self in depression, and that's what's being pressed down, energy is being pressed down, the energy of anger directed toward oneself. It may seem like it's directed toward somebody else and blocked and put back upon oneself. I'm angry with myself for something, and then there's another feeling beneath the anger, that I'm angry with myself, that I can't accept in myself. And we'll explore, and you will see quite often the feeling of confirmed worthlessness, impotence of will, weakness and helplessness, inadequacy, whatever it might be. And then I hate myself. I feel terrible for being worthless. I pretend that I'm hostile to the person who makes me feel worthless, the hostility directed toward myself. Or guilt, which is also a form of self-attack. You see, guilt is also anger directed toward myself for not fulfilling certain kinds of standards, certain kinds of levels that I hold necessary for my conditional acceptance of myself. If I don't meet those conditions, then I become terribly abusive toward myself. So if mommy got mentally ill, it must have been my fault. I must have contributed, I must have been a bad kid, I feel guilty, or whatever. Guilt can be relatively real, or it can be an illusional form of guilt in which I hold myself responsible for something clearly I have no responsibility for, just to pretend that I have some control over my world. So if anything happens, I must somehow be participant in it. So if I'm that young child in the fire, I might say, well, my brother died, it was my fault. Some of you may remember that very nice movie, lovely movie, Ordinary People, in which the young boy struggles with the guilt of his own brother and never could accept the fact that his brother died and he didn't, and that he was stronger than his brother and he held on, and he feels guilty for all of that. And of course, at some level, we all feel guilty because we are competitive. And there are times when we really wish our brother was out of the way so that our mother would love us only. And that's always lying there and contributing to the guilt and so forth. But without a repressed hostility, if the hostility could be expressed, no depression. I've never seen anybody that could express hostility that ever got depressed. Or in any given moment, if they can listen to their depression and hear the hate they have, which may sound towards somebody else, but eventually when I discuss it with you, you'll see it's always self-directed. Then you'll hear for what reason they feel so much hate for themselves underneath: the worthlessness, the unlovableness, the inadequacy, the helplessness, the fearfulness. I should never have been so frightened of my father. I should have stood up to him. I hate myself for being such a weak chicken, coward. Why didn't I stand up to him? And now I'm fighting with everybody in sight, trying to undo my fearful reaction to Daddy and giving in to him. And of course, if I hadn't, he might have killed me. That's very intelligent for me to surrender to him. But the ego can't tolerate that feeling of impotence, weakness, helplessness, and the value judgment put upon it that I'm a nothing because I didn't stand up to him. I'm an absolute nothing. There is no ego. All right, so in depression, you will uncover all these levels. You'll have to uncover the hostility first. And then you'll uncover the cause of the hostility, the worthlessness or whatever. All of which is pressed down. This message is pressed down. And the word depression itself, the label depression itself, is part of the cover to keep this free-flowing message from flowing into conscious awareness. This message of I am unlovable, I am worthless, I'm a bad person because I killed my brother and whatever else is going on there. I deserve to suffer in the way that I'm suffering. Or the learned helplessness thing, I see something much more deeper there. A tremendous resentment that the world doesn't obey my own particular will. A sense of omnipotence that says, and bitterness, what right has this world not to give me what I want, not to obey the way I want it to go? And you'll find people that are chronically depressed, especially manic depressive psychosis, that if they get this sense of omnipotence confirmed, they become manically incredibly overjoyed and powerful feeling, and that's their security. And whenever something happens in the world that they see they can't control and their will is not omnipotent, And everybody comes out of the womb with that sense of omnipotence of will. We are the center of the universe. We are egocentric. We are the middle of everything, and everything must obey us. We are the God of the universe, as we were the only thing in the universe of Mommy's belly, in the womb. And then you watch how people get depressed whenever things don't go the way they want them to go. And they have this rage toward life, toward God, toward whatever, and they don't know how to express it. They don't know to whom to express it. They don't even know they are feeling it in many cases. But you will see it if you see enough cases of depression. When this message releases, when the label is lifted, you ask the client, if that depression could speak whatever it is, what would it say? I don't know. What they're saying is, I don't want to know, because it's not off the top of your head. You have to move from the head to the gut area where the feeling lies. Oh, I know you don't know what it is. Can you take a moment to feel what you are calling depression? Forget about the word depression. Just see if you can hear what that depression is trying to say. If that depression could speak, what would it say? Goddamn lousy world. These people make me feel so, these women rejecting me and make me feel so unlovable and so unmasculine. They're killing my concept of myself, my whole view of myself. You know, kill those people back. I mean, I get all of that directed back to you, but that's really the essence of it. You hear the resentment, tremendous anger, the hate, which seems to be directed, in this example, toward the women, is directed toward themselves, fundamentally, for not being what they think they should be and having it confirmed by these other people. Therefore seems to be hostile toward those other people. You go around in circles, trying to explore what the other people think of them and how to change their impression of you, because as I said before, it makes no difference what people's impression of you is. What makes a difference pathologically is your reaction to it. I can't change the world for you. I can't even guarantee that what people tell you they think of you is what they really think of you. Who knows what goes on in people's minds in terms of what they really think of you? They may be telling you anything just to manipulate you to what they think of you. We never can control that. It's irrelevant. Because if it doesn't contribute to the way you think about yourself, it's irrelevant what people think of you. Because it has no capacity to injure you in any way. What you think about yourself can deflate your ego, can threaten to wipe it out. That has pathological potential. So, you think I'm a lousy teacher, you might be right. It has no effect upon me, because I don't internalize it. But many therapists, they will not internalize the negative transference. The client says, I hate your guts, you're the worst therapist there ever was. Look at that, the transference. Supervisor will surely confirm that. I never really hate you. But then the client says, oh, I think you're the best therapist I've ever seen. You're such a caring, wonderful person. That I'll believe. I'm ready to believe that about myself. I don't see the transference element in that, a projection also. And I'll go with a smiling face into my supervisor's office and say, well, you've got yourself by a student. Finally had it confirmed. Finally somebody saw what a sensitive, loving, caring, considerate person I really am. Will believe the positive transference but not the negative. It's all reaction. You see? And one person will hate your guts for the same reason that somebody else thinks you're wonderful. If you're a strong person, somebody who's in adolescent rebellion will hate you for being stronger than they are. If I'm a passive dependent childlike person, you're strong, and you treat me like a parent, figure I will love you for it, which is wonderful. Same behavior. So you have to understand that the client is pathological because of their own conceptual abstraction of life and then their reaction to their own conceptual abstractions. You're going to have to uncover all of that in order to see why they conceptualize that rejection, for example, as confirmation of their unmasculinity, of their unlovableness, of their helplessness, of their insecurity, their abandonment, however they conceptualize this. So just like there's no technique for depression, there is no given dynamic always in it. The hostility, repressed, is always in it. But that's only, again, part of the surface of it. When that gets released, you can start to hear what it is about myself that I hate about myself, produced by what factors. But the pain is always my own reaction to myself, my own self-conceptualization with which I identify. This event proves that I'm unlovable, I identify with it, and I hate myself, as I believe other people hate me. I abuse myself.
What do you mean by that, I hate myself?
It means that the ego feels a sense of affirmation through its capacity to attack. The ego is always looking for excuses to attack yourself with. Because remember, I think we discussed the ego is born out of attack. It's born out of conflict. It's born out of saying no. And that movement against, to feel that movement is to basically affirm the ego sense of individuation, of psychological separatedness between others.
But what is the self with the ego is attacking?
Doesn't make any difference. Some conceptualized version of itself, something that conceptually represents its own state of negation. Worthlessness, impotence of will, absolute insecurity, no sense of aliveness, its own boredom, in fact, any aspect of itself, lack of identity of male or female. Individuation is attacking differentiation. So talking about the fact that the ego is built upon the psychological sense of individuation, which comes from willfulness, psychologically separating from mother by saying, no, I won't, having a will of your own. The ego is born out of attack, out of willfulness, out of combat. And then it robes itself conceptually with self-concepts that it identifies with, so that it can be also differentiated as well as individuated. It's important to reflect on that, understand that, but you'll see that as basic threat in every situation. So, in some cases, depression is fundamentally, go deep enough, you may have all of these as justifications for my attack upon myself, but the basic justification is, if I don't feel my own power by attacking myself, there's no ego. My own potency of will, that I can hurt myself, I can have an effect upon myself, therefore I'm the cause of effects, therefore I exist. If my parents do things and I have no effect upon them, it's like I'm no cause, no agent, no willpower, therefore I don't exist, because the ego is fundamentally born out of a sense of psychological separatedness or individuatedness, arising out of willfulness, out of saying no to mommy and daddy. So the ego is always attacking itself, always. You don't believe me? Listen to your own thoughts sometimes. It goes into your gut level. Thought itself is attack. You don't see that. Thought itself is a rejection of what is for what should be. Because if what is was good enough, no thought would be necessary. Thought itself is reaction. Something you can't tolerate in yourself, producing self-consciousness upon which the ego depends. So you're going to have to understand the ego very deeply if you're going to engage in a profound kind of psychotherapy that's really going to be effective. Because that's basically what feels injured, what feels threatened is the ego. Unless you understand its components and how it operates, you will be operating at this level. Giving me medication for my depression, giving me compliments so I like myself better, helping me to feel what should be instead of what is, and never getting into the depths of the threats of the ego at various levels. Teaching me how to express my hostility, be more assertive, for example, not understanding that for me, if I assert myself, that feeds my superego, and because all assertive people, all aggressive people are evil, they're sinful. And so by teaching me to do that, you only feed superego's ability to abuse me as a way of saying, see, I have injured other people by being aggressive. So now I have to injure myself and get a suicidal reaction.
Go to that again, I didn't understand. Being assertive reminds me of a client.
Yeah, what I'm suggesting to you is you don't just take the client where they're at in terms of what they say they want. I need to be more assertive. That's always the should be. You're always asking, why aren't you? Like we talked about the unmotivated client last week. I'm unmotivated to study. Teaching me motivational techniques. And it's very dangerous to do that. In this case, I am unassertive. It's not that I should be assertive. No. What is that I'm unassertive. It serves a purpose for me. It is a defense. That's why I'm unassertive. I don't have to be taught assertiveness techniques. Every human being is naturally assertive when there's no consequence. No negative consequence to being assertive. Assertive just means you just say what you feel is real for you. You teach me techniques. I have to look you in the eye, shake your hand firmly, and speak from the diaphragm, and raise my... What is that? That's all nonsense. I don't have to be taught to be assertive. I have to be taught not to be afraid of the consequences of being assertive. If I'm assertive, Daddy will beat the hell out of me. I can feel that. But if I talk back to him in any way, I'm a goner. If I'm assertive with my mother, who's afraid of the battle of wills, she will leave me, or she will abuse me, or she will love my brother better, and I will be left out in the cold. If I am unwilling to be assertive, you don't need it to be taught, because assertiveness is just saying what you feel is real for yourself in a given moment, asserting the truth of yourself. In this case, I was brought up in a very religious family where hostile thoughts was a reflection of the devil in you. If you are angry, that means you were possessed by the devil. Now, try and teach me to be assertive. You see what you're playing into here? The moment you teach me to be assertive, I don't understand what the problem is, and you teach me to raise my voice, I can get angry with you, and that thing slips. And I see the devil in me, right away take a gun, blow my brains out. What have you done to me? You understand the unethicalness of proceeding in therapy without understanding where this is going and what you're doing with it. It's all defense. If I respond fearfully to a situation, don't make me less fearful. Understand why fear helps you to avoid certain situations that threaten me. Don't push me into those situations. You don't know what kind of overwhelming reaction it will produce in me. You are blind as to what the threat to me is, and yet you're pushing me into a situation that can overwhelm my ego because you happen to value assertiveness. Well, sure, assertiveness is nice. It's necessary for relationships. But it's a should be right now. You have to understand what it is. The client says, I should be more assertive. And we say, well, perhaps. We really don't know if you should be. You think you ought to be more assertive. Let's find out why you're not being assertive. How are we going to find out, basically, why you're not more assertive? You're going to have to find out what consequence you expect to ensue as a function of being assertive. And then start exploring why that consequence is unacceptable to you. If I'm assertive, people won't like me. If they don't like me, they will reduce my sense of worth. Or they will abandon me. Or they will physically beat up on me and I have no defense. I feel so fragile and so weak. You understand? There's a consequence. We can show the client eventually that the anticipated consequence is not necessarily what the consequence will be. And then they will be free to be assertive. I assure you they will have no trouble in being assertive once there's no consequence to it, no negative consequence to it.
How do you show them?
Well, you'll have to show them from the very beginning why they expect that consequence, why they thought the consequence ensued in the first place, and why they think it will always ensue. Eventually you're going to show them that they're not the same child they used to be, where they're really weak and helpless and defenseless, and where abandonment early could have been problems for them, and now they can take care of themselves. And so the defensive reaction that says, don't get assertive, don't get angry, don't alienate anyone because you will not survive, is no longer appropriate. It may have been appropriate at one time. It may have saved my life at one time. But see, I can hate myself even for saving my own life, as I said before. I can hate myself for not talking back to my father. The sense is rage, and he's looking for an excuse to externalize his own self-hate to me. He was looking for an excuse. And if I gave him any excuse at all, if I talked back to him, if I didn't say yes sir right away, You'll clobber the hell out of me. And yet I hate myself for not standing up to him. Here, 4 or 5-year-old kids standing up to him. Not only an adult, but probably a 50-year-old. So we have to show the client that they were being very intelligent and not talking back. They weren't being chicken. That's their reaction, interpretation of it.
How do you show them?
Or by helping them to explore what would have happened if you had talked back. My father would have killed me. Are you sure? How do you know? Well, the few times I tried it, they nearly killed me. Then why do you suppose the reason was that you didn't talk back to him? I guess I didn't want to kill me. You think that was a foolish thing to do? No, it's to save my life. You don't see the whole thing. There's nothing much there to see. You explore it with them. Oh, that's why I didn't. I've been hating myself all these years for being too gutless. See, anybody in that situation would not have been gutless. They would have been intelligent to put self-preservation first and put aside their aggressiveness, their assertiveness with their father.
But it seems like the self-hate continues despite the insight as to what happened.
No, because the understanding brings compassion. That's something you must see very clearly. If it's real understanding, always brings compassion, as you will feel to the client. Whatever you understand puts you in their shoes, automatically brings you compassion, which is really forgiveness. You don't forgive by making yourself repress and forget. You forgive by understanding what you did and the fact that you had no choice but to do it. You had no choice but to do it. I help many couples see that in marriage counseling, where the wife says, I will never forgive my husband for having an affair on me. That's the greatest betrayal you can do. I will never love him again. I'll never forgive him. I might as well dump him now. But as she listens, as we explore it with her husband, and she begins to hear that he had no choice from his point of view, because the doubts about his own masculinity were building up to such a degree because of his interaction with his wife and so forth. And he really felt somehow that if he doesn't prove his masculinity, that he will be feeling something that he really can't tolerate. And she hears all this, and she begins to understand that in that moment, he felt choiceless. He had to do a life and death matter for the ego. The ego would die if it did not act out in that particular way, from his point of view. Once he understands that, so he no longer has a need to prove his masculinity through that means, once he's no longer identified with masculinity that way, then he's a different kind of guy. Now she can forgive him because his needs are different. He doesn't have the need anymore to do that, and she doesn't have to worry about trusting him because he's outgrown that need. It's a different guy. She understands. We all have our ego threats, and when we think our ego is threatened, we may do bizarre things even. We have a need for attention, ego's need for recognition, and it's really very minimal. You're afraid you don't exist because somebody sees you psychologically. You may jump up in a movie theater and start screaming, and let them know what you're doing, just to get people to look at you. What the heck have I done? What did I do this for? So you'll abuse yourself and say, that was the kookiest thing I could have ever done. But your ego said, if you don't do it, you die. If you don't get people to look at you, to recognize your existence, to prove that you have a potent effect upon them, to get them to look at you when you want, then you have no will, you don't exist. You have no identity. That's spoken subconsciously. If you don't understand the ego, you can't begin therapy. What are you doing therapy with? But all you have is a technique, and the technique will not give you the understanding you need, so you will define the patient's problem in a certain way, and you'll let the technique to deal with that particular aspect. And you will call that therapy. What else can you do? So if you want to be a real therapist, it behooves you to understand what the ego is and how it works and what it's threatened by and what therapy has to be in order to alleviate that threat. So it isn't enough to say, well, the client is depressed because they don't assert themselves. Let's get them to assert themselves. If I don't assert myself, if I don't take risks of any kind, you can be sure that there's a good reason for it as far as I'm concerned. I don't do it because I anticipate some kind of painful consequence to my ego. Now, it's your job to show me that that consequence is not necessarily one will ensue. And if it does ensue, that I can deal with that consequence a good deal better now than I could have at 4 years of age. I can deal with anything now. Why? Because the external situation is irrelevant to how I feel about myself. If I don't react and don't value judge, I will remain at peace with myself. I will remain a whole. I will not be divisive. I will not conceptualize and value judge and reject what I value judge as negative and become fragmented thereby and repressed and fixated. So this is a long way around to say that the specific pathology does not have a specific corresponding therapy. There is no therapy for depression. There is only the understanding of what this particular client's depression is really all about. Even if you say, if I can get it to be hostile, that will help. It may help some, but it's not the full answer. Any more than giving them exercise when they run around the block 14 times. Drains the tension, physical tension, but doesn't touch the psychological tension of the depression. Or giving them a punching bag and letting them punch living daylights out of it. So that they drain the hostility, they will build it back up again, because they are hostile about something subconscious they have not really dealt with yet. Their own worth, confirmed worthlessness, their confirmed weakness, their confirmed inadequacy, their unlovableness. They hate themselves for being a female, for example. That's unchangeable. I'm not sure what happens to me when I hate myself. The females are clearly lesser, inferior human beings. Parents showed me that. Mother showed me that. And so I have good cause to hate myself continuously. Or whatever, just the reverse in some families. So to begin with, I would like to help you be more sophisticated by moving you away from the search for techniques in regard to specific disorders. And to move toward understanding the disorders, what's happening within them, and what the therapy has to be based upon your understanding of the pathology, of what is being rejected, and why it's being rejected. And then we can talk about how to integrate that.
I have a question. What about certain things like not getting enough rest or eating a poor diet or not getting enough exercising? Wouldn't you say that can feed into the condition?
No, it's all irrelevant. I'm not saying it doesn't feed. I'm saying your reaction to it feeds. Because once you start feeling tired, you start to feel weak. And you start to feel weak, the ego feels impotent of will, and it feels weak. It feels no defense, no power. It hates to feel vulnerable through feeling tired and weak. Your reaction to it. You cease reacting to it that way, or reacting to anything, letting every sensation just come and go, you're not going to produce the same problem. Don't look at the tiredness. Don't look at the lack of sleep. If you want to look at the lack of sleep, you might look more into the perhaps why they didn't sleep and look into the dreams they may have had that kept them from sleeping. You may find a lot of hostility in the dreams, and the hostility may be related to the dream, you see, and not necessarily to the fatigue that you are seeing. I'm saying it's reaction. Some people react to being tired in very negative ways. To them it means kind of emasculation. It feels like you're weak, like you lack power. And if you identify with a sense of power and you feel tired, you get scared. The ego gets scared, and you respond to that fright in your own particular way. You respond to anxiety. Reaction. The ego is its reactions. No reaction, try it and see. React to nothing, see if you can find an ego. See if you can feel a sense of psychological boundedness in space and time. Sense of individuation, differentiation. If there's no reaction. If you are just being. Therefore you are listening for reactions, for dramatizations of life. The ego is an entire dramatization itself, an embellishment, psychological drama played out in order to prove that you are living a certain life story as a particular ego that you are. And all these things are happening to you.
What would a healthy functioning ego be like?
There really isn't, but we'll talk about a relatively more healthily functioning ego, meaning ego strength instead of ego weakness, where the ego doesn't feel threatened all the time, and doesn't feel so tenuous, so shatterable, so weak, so fragile, that any kind of pain will shatter it completely in terms of the sense of self. So we talk about a relative state of ego strength, which you shouldn't confuse with psychological health, because the ego is an adolescent stage of development. It's when we build a conceptual identity before we know our real potentials and abilities, and can be more spontaneous with who we are from moment to moment, without identifying with the will and the self-concepts that the ego identifies with. So for the adult, the ego is always immature, it's always pathological, because it's not your real identity. It's a construct, which is necessary in adolescence, because you don't want to remain an extension of your parent, and you don't know your real potentials and abilities yet to be spontaneous with yourself, so you build this in-between stage. But ego strength means that in terms of the ego's basic needs that I outlined for you, feel basically confirmed. Your sense of security, your sense of worth, sense of identity, your sense of power, sense of control, sense of all that. You feel life has basically affirmed your ego through a gratification of those basic needs. So we say you have relatively good ego strength, and even to the point where you don't have to be self-conscious all the time, as we have bolstering the ego through constant self-consciousness, you can force you to forget yourself and enter into a relationship where you commune with somebody else, that is, you are able to tune in to what's going on in the other person, which we hope you can do as a therapist. If you can't hear what's going on in the other person, there's no chance for you to get them to face what they have to face, because you're not really hearing what they have to face. So just as you listen to me talking, you know there are gaps in your ability to hear me, and although I'm speaking in a straight line, you're hearing me in gaps. So that you hear something, and your mind wanders, and you react to what you hear, then you come back and pick up a little bit more, and then your mind wanders again. And you have all these gaps with reality. If you observe yourself, you'll see that's the truth. You may think you've heard me this way, but you really haven't. You just picked up on the thread every once in a while. When your ability to hear me is this, then you are a good therapist. And you are psychologically getting there, because you're not in the service of the ego, constantly recoiling away from reality to become self-conscious back upon yourself, which is what you're doing through your reactivity to what I said. It triggers things about your own life, it triggers questions you have about what I'm saying. And instead of continuing to listen to me and hear spontaneously and understand what I'm saying, you are reacting, and therefore there are gaps in what's happening. Those gaps is your own limitation as a therapist. Because while you are listening to yourself, the client is going this way. And you have missed something here, you have missed something here, you have missed something here, and now you're trying to put the whole thing together, and it's very difficult to do. So students bring in tapes or whatever, and I say, can't you hear the client was saying this? And they say, yeah, I do hear that. How come I missed that? I say, I must not be a good therapist. No, it's not related to that. I have to ask you, where was your mind at this particular time? That's why you didn't hear it. Not because you're not capable of hearing it, not out of intelligence or adequacy as a therapist, but of how self-conscious you need to be. If we have a relatively weak ego, we have to bolster it constantly with self-consciousness. So it's always recoiling back upon itself. You agree? Okay, so why don't we just pause and